Hi, my name is Wyatt Reed, co-chairman of the FEMA Region 6 Youth Preparedness Council. The FEMA Region 6 Youth Preparedness Council exists to serve youth preparedness needs across the states of Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Texas, New Mexico, and the tribal nations therein. In today's #R6Prepares training series video, members of a new Braunfels Community Emergency Response Team present information over nutrition preparation. To learn more about this and other topics, visit r6ypc.youthprep.us. Thanks for tuning in, and I hope you enjoyed the video.
Hi everyone, my name is Anna Marie Henman, certified health coach and owner of the H2 Life MB. Thank you so much for having me as your guest speaker for the FEMA Region 6 Citizen, Core, and Community Preparedness teams. Again, thank you for this opportunity to share a little bit of information about what I do. But before we get to that, a little bit about me. I am a former teacher by trade. I worked for about 10 years for both the Chicago Public School System and Northside ISD in San Antonio. So I very much miss being in the classroom. So this is really great for me to be here with you all today. Hopefully the information that's presented, you'll be able to take a little bit of something away to share within your own families, your local communities, and of course your schools. So bear with me one second while I share my screen. And then we'll go ahead and get started. And you see the topic that we are going to be discussing today is junk food diets in the nutrition crisis in America and what we can do about it. So the question that I want you all to think about is really this, right? Why should we even care about our health? We're all really young, right? You're sitting in your classrooms, you're busy, consumed with just your day-to-day as students at school. And so sometimes we don't necessarily, let's say, have health at the forefront of our mind, right? But when we think long-term, what kind of impact health can have, right? Poor health especially, right? It can actually prevent us from doing the things that we love. Like you see here, traveling, for example, let's say extracurricular activities, spending time with family, again, just being active, right? And so again, the question that I ask a lot of my clients is, do you want to live a long life or do you want to live a long life that you can live well, right? So there's a big difference between the two and something to consider. So what's interesting with this slide here, right, is that your age group is the target when we think about marketing, right, towards teens when it comes to food. And unfortunately, when we think about food and beverage companies, they don't always have your best interest at hand and spend billions of dollars each year to aggressively market towards your group, right? With foods that are high in sugar, high in fat, salt, and really very little to minimum marketing when it comes to foods that are good for you, like fruits and vegetables and whole grains and things like that. And there's a whole strategy behind it. So again, when you look at these images, they probably come to mind because you've seen them before, right? Whether it's on a commercial or walking down the grocery aisle with your parents, right? And you see lots of familiar characters from different movies or cartoons or things like that. Lots of bright colors, maybe even some toys as well. Social media is a really let's say big opportunity for these companies as well to sponsor ads. Sometimes you might even see these companies sponsor sporting events, scholarship contests. They pay for placement in movies and TV shows, again, just to target your age group, right? And convince you that these are things that you need to have. And when we think about the statistics, it's actually kind of interesting because their marketing does work. Every day, 64% of youth under the age of 20 consume at least one sugary drink, and 41% of teens consume fast food, right? So again, those numbers are pretty high. So their marketing, their dollars are working, right? But the question that we're going to think about in today's session is what exactly is that doing to your health, right, over time? So I always like to share some statistics, and these statistics are really relevant when it comes to kids, right? So obesity is related to more than 20 major chronic illnesses. And what we're seeing here is that children, our school-age kids, are getting sicker they're feeling sadder, and they're becoming more obese. The CDC predicts that 1 in 3 children will eventually get diabetes. There has been an increase in the percentage of children on medications for chronic illnesses, and you can kind of see what an example of a chronic illness is if you look at the graphic to your right. The number of preschool children receiving mood-altering prescriptions has tripled. The number of Ritalin prescriptions for 2 to 4-year-olds has also tripled, and there's been an increase in high cholesterol, asthma, and diabetes overall for your age group. So this is something that we've never really seen before as far as school-age children becoming more and more sick. And when we look at the data, it's all coming back to diet and a lack of activity. So when we think about what poor lean choices lead to, and we'll talk about what lean means in just a moment, you can see here, right? So nutrition absolutely 100% affects your ability to learn, your behavior in the classroom or at home, and how you perform with athletics. So if you're somebody who's on a team, or whether that's with your school or with the city league, and absolutely there's links to what you eat will affect how you perform on the field or on the court. So when we think about what some of the, let's say, mental Ds are, right? Lots of connections with ADD, ADHD, you see bipolar disorder, learning disabilities, OCD, etc. And when we think about what some of those physical, let's say, effects are of poor nutrition, we start to see things like this, right? Diabetes, GERD, IBD, other infectious diseases, vision deficiencies, even an increase in allergies as well. Right? So what does the science show us, which is always something that's big and important to consider, right? We always want to look at the science. We always want to look at the data, because the data, right, that will tell us what's going on. So when it comes to our brain function, right, the science is really clear. So junk food basically causes, right, the neurotransmitters in your brain, right, to function improperly. Okay, and we're going to take a look at an example of what I mean by that in just a second. And healthier food choices essentially help those neurotransmitters fire correctly. Okay, so it's really simple when we think about this concept here. So the more junk food that we put in our body, right, our brain can't really perform. The healthier stuff that we put within our body, we are able to function and think more clearly, focus better as well. Okay, so take a look at this example, which I think is really interesting here. So you see this is an actual study from the Oxford-Durham study group of researchers, right, that was trying to understand how food choices impact brain function. And so on the left, you'll see a 6-year-old's handwriting prior to any sort of health intervention. And then the image on the right shows, right, the same child's handwriting 1 month after a change in diet. And so again, when you look at both of these images, consider what you see the difference could be. All right, so it's more clear. This child was probably able to focus more, right? So again, when we think about the link in nutrition and how that can impact how we do in the classroom, it's pretty significant, okay? So how do we fix this, right? We know what the problem is, right? We know that we're seeing all of these chronic illnesses and increases in prescriptions and medications for your age group. So what do we do about it? And it's really simple when we think about what the solution is, right? And it really comes down to these 4 areas, right? So how we live, the lifestyle, right, that we choose to lead, how we move, the type of exercise and physical activity that we incorporate in our day-to-day, our attitude, how we think, right? So that's all of the mental work, right? Our perspective on life, how we think about things, and nutrition, right? How we eat. So these 4 areas together at any age, right, and at any stage of life will help us lead a lean lifestyle, right? And so that is, again, the acronym, right? It stands for lifestyle, exercise, attitude, and nutrition. And all of those components are what's going to get us to, let's say, stopping this trend that we see right now with health amongst your age group. Okay, so we're going to switch gears a little bit and kind of talk about how, right? The how-to of, let's say, approaching healthy eating. And we're going to do so by talking about traffic light eating, okay? So when we think about traffic light eating, right, there's really three categories, right? So green, yellow, and red. And so this is a really easy approach. I love the colors because it's easy for you to remember. And when we think about green light foods, right, we really are thinking about foods that you can eat as much as you want of, right? Yellow light foods are things to eat every day, but in moderation, and you can take a look at what those are, right? So the green light foods are more fruits and vegetables, right? Have lots of phytonutrients. Those are the things that are really colorful, that are good for you. Yellow light foods, right, would be things like your whole grains, cheese, your right kinds of fats, nuts, oils, etc. And then, of course, when we think about red light foods, these are foods that we have to stop and think, right? And maybe every once in a while, we have these particular foods in our diet, okay? So when we think about green light foods, right, just to get a little bit more detail, right, we're talking about foods that are unprocessed, that are naturally colorful, right? So lots of phytonutrients in those bright vegetables. They usually can be eaten raw, but also you can prepare them in a variety of different ways, roasted, grilled, steamed, baked, etc. They're low in calories, high in nutrients, and you can essentially eat as much as you want. Okay. When we talk about yellow light foods, right? So these are also a necessary part of our healthy diet. They provide a different set of vitamins, minerals, and other nutrients. They usually have a little bit more fat or sugar than green light foods. These would be foods that are inclusive of whole grain breads, whole wheat pastas, yogurt, nuts, low fat cheese, lean cuts of meat, and fish would all be in the yellow light category. And then, of course, when we think of red light foods, right? So these are generally our more processed foods, right? So they're, let's say, man-made. These are foods that you can generally see produced or made in a factory. They're lower in protein and fiber. We can sometimes find lots of high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated oils, artificial flavors, colors, chemical preservatives. So we're talking about like the foods that are in boxes, packages, have lots of numbers and ingredients that we can't even pronounce most of the time. And oftentimes these are foods that contribute to inflammation and unhealthy aging. So this does include a lot of packaged foods and fast foods. Okay. So I'm going to put you to the test here, and we're just going to kind of take a look, right, at steak, for example. So when we think of steak, what category does it go into, red light or yellow light? We can see here, right, red meat can actually be either, right? So it depends on the cut of meat and the portion and how it's prepared. So a lot of times what I share with my clients is when we think of portion, right, we just make a fist, right, and we look at the flat size of our fist, and that's generally one portion or one serving, okay? So you can apply that next time you are eating, let's say, a piece of steak or a piece of chicken or any sort of protein. That's a good rule of thumb. Okay, when we look at our egg here, right, eggs are actually a yellow light food, right? So preparation can make a difference. So try choosing healthier fats like olive oil or even a small amount of unsalted butter or grass-fed butter when you are preparing your eggs. Okay, try to go through these quickly. When we think of bananas, right, this should be an easy one. Everyone should say green light. Now, this one's tricky as well, right? So when we take a look at a salad, right, our instinct tells us, well, there's lots of vegetables in this should be green. And it can be, however, when we look at this particular salad, which is a Caesar salad, there's lots of croutons and then, of course, the creamy dressing that's on top of the Caesar salad. So those things, right, can quickly turn a green light food into a red light food. So we have to be a little bit mindful, right, of what kinds of toppings we're putting on the salad. And then, of course, the dressing, the amount of dressing, sometimes what type of dressing we're using as well. Okay. When we look at these walnuts here, right, are they red light or yellow light? They're actually yellow light. So nuts are in that category that are things that are good for you. It's really easy to overconsume. So we do want to be mindful of portions. I generally recommend about a handful, right, size of nuts. And again, too much, right, of anything can always kind of cause some stomach issues. So we always want to try and pay attention, right, to the label, which we'll get to in just a moment, and look at serving size. Okay. So when we look at brown rice is an example of a yellow light food. So again, the yellow light category, remember, these are everyday foods that we can eat, but it's all about moderation. It's all about portion control as well. So when we think about rice or pasta or even bread as an example, I share this a lot. Always opt for the whole wheat or whole grain version. When we think about why white wheat bread versus white, why wheat pasta versus white pasta, or why brown rice versus white rice, again, it all comes down to the nutritional content. In the processing that happens to make grains of rice white or pasta white or even bread, the fiber and protein is really kind of taken away in that processing that happens in the factories. And so you get more nutrition when you opt for the whole wheat or whole grain. Next time you're at the grocery store, you can always pick up a loaf of white bread and wheat bread and kind of do the test. You'll notice that the wheat bread is going to be much heavier than the loaf of white bread for the reasons that I mentioned. Okay, so this should be an easy one then for you, right? So when we look at bread, this can be both, right? So it depends on the quality of bread, right? And that's really what I want to emphasize here. It's the quality of food that you're putting in your body. So when you're choosing your bread, again, it's best to pick bread that is made from whole grains. And if that's the case, then it would be yellow light. But if you are picking, let's say, something that doesn't have a lot of nutritional value, then it would go towards the red light category in the event, for example, of selecting white bread. Okay, this should be another easy one for you as well, right? So when we think about this juicy hamburger that's on the bun that you see here, is this red light or yellow light? We want to say red light in the way that it's prepared here, but it can actually be a yellow light food. So when we think about healthy eating, right, it's not about taking foods away that you love. It's about making them a little bit healthier and improving the quality. So an example that I'll give you here with this burger is removing the bun or using a whole wheat bun in its place, taking away the mayonnaise, which has lots of ingredients that are not great for us. The tomato, the lettuce, the cheese is okay, right, along with the patty of the burger. I think I even see some onions in that picture as well. You could instead maybe add a spread of avocado, which is an example of a healthy fat and can also provide some extra flavor for that burger. You could also go bunless. You could go with the option of a lettuce wrap as well. And lots of fast food restaurants are kind of getting with the program and providing healthier options to their customers. So that's just something to consider next time you are making a fast food run. If that is something that you want to enjoy, always try to go for the grill option. Try to squeeze in as many vegetables as you can. And you'll be surprised, just from removing the bun, you are, again, making that dish a little bit healthier. Okay, when it comes to ice cream, right? Is this yellow light? Is it red light? Again, it comes down to ingredients. So most of the time, ice cream can fall within the red light category. But remember, ingredients are important. There's lots of great recipes where you can make ice cream at home, just using some frozen fruit and throwing it in a blender. So in that case, that would make it green light. I know. Can you believe that? Green light and ice cream? Who would have thought? So again, it's always important to pay attention to the label. Next time you're at the grocery store, just take a look. The general rule of thumb is if you're looking at that ingredient list on the container of ice cream and there's so many things that you can't pronounce, or the ingredients go beyond 10, or you see that the sugar content is really, really high, then that's probably something that you should have in moderation, or maybe perhaps pick a better quality. Okay, so something that I challenge you with is now having a little bit of background on traffic light eating with what green light, yellow light, and red light foods are, is do this at home. Go through your own pantry, go through your fridge, see what category do you see most of. And when we think about, balancing our plate, right, it's really all about the quality. So if you think about your round plate, half of your plate really should be mostly green light foods, right? About 25% of that plate will be like your protein source, right? So that would be maybe, again, your chicken, lean cuts of beef, right? If you're a vegetarian, maybe it's more of a tofu, maybe it's seafood. And then, of course, the other 25% of your plate could be maybe a grain. Say you love pasta, you love rice, right? Again, go for the whole wheat, whole grain option, or could even be a starchier vegetable like a potato, like let's say half of a corn on the cob, or even some peas. So there's definitely ways for you to enjoy the foods that you love, but it's all about how you balance it on your plate and making sure that you're fueling your bodies with nutrients and things that it needs, because you guys are still growing and your body needs those ingredients that are, again, either come from the ground, right, or come from a tree, raised on a farm, or fished in the sea. So if you're putting your plate together and let's say most of your foods come from those three categories, then you more than likely are doing a pretty good job already. Okay. So let's take a look at a nutrition label. This is oftentimes an area that can be a little overwhelming, but it's a really important skill to have. And this is something that you could actually perhaps even teach your parents as well, right? Or your caretakers when we think of the basics of a nutrition label and how to read it. So if you take a look, for example, at the black arrow where it says start, the area that's highlighted in yellow, that generally tells us, right, the serving size of that particular product. So let's say, for example, that this is a product of chips, right? So this is telling us that one serving size is 1 cup, and there are 2 servings in that container. So all of the numbers that you see, for example, in blue, right, or in pink and green, you would essentially have to multiply that times 2, right? Again, if you are consuming that entire bag of chips. That's why it's important to remember, right, serving size, right, and paying attention to the calories, right, paying attention to the nutritional content of it. Is there protein? Is there fiber? Are there things that are good in it? Does it have too much sugar? Okay, so let's look at the area in yellow again. So that tells us our serving size. So being mindful of that. The area in white, amount per serving, that just tells us calories. I always kind of share this tip with my clients is that it's much more important to take a look at the quality of food that you're eating versus counting calories, right? Because you could easily eat, let's say 1,400 calories, but it could all be, right, calories from the red light category, right, which again isn't really providing any sort of nutritional content or adding anything of value to your diet, as opposed to, let's say, eating more green light and yellow light foods, which you already know, right, are the things that our body needs to function properly. So when you're taking a look at the pink category as an example, you'll see here, right, that tells us how much salt, right, sodium is in that product, cholesterol, trans fat, right, trans fat is something that we want to avoid, saturated fat, total fat. Again, it's all about eating the right kinds of fats, but we definitely want to make sure we stay away from those trans fats. And so if you can find something that says 0 in that category, even better. And then of course, when we think of sodium, right, the lower that number, the better as well. The category that you see in green is really important. So that is the fiber and the protein that is within that particular product. So again, anytime you see those numbers on the high side, then that is more than likely something that is pretty good for you. But notice what's in between fiber and protein, and you see sugar. And so whenever we see, let's take cereal as an example, that's absolutely an important category to consider. There's lots of cereals that are marketed towards your age group that are loaded in sugar. And so what happens sometimes is that we eat that, and right afterwards, we feel great and our blood sugar spikes. But then what happens shortly after? It crashes. And sometimes that happens when we are sitting in class and it's hard for us to focus, to listen to the teacher, to pay attention. And then we're hungry again, right? And our mind is elsewhere. So again, when it comes down to cereal, cereal can be a good option. But again, it's paying attention to that label, right? And making sure that you are also helping your parents pick out a cereal that is good for you and that's not loaded with sugar, but has lots of fiber and protein, right? That can keep you feeling full, and balancing it out maybe with some fresh fruit in the morning or even a cup of yogurt or oatmeal as an example. Okay. So again, when we think of, a nutrition label and why these things are important, the more knowledge that we have, the better decisions we can make. And unfortunately, the food industry just really doesn't have our best interests at heart. And so it's our responsibility as the consumer, right, to do our due diligence and make sure that we're picking things that are good for us. Now, take a look at the nutrition facts to the right. At the very, very bottom, you'll see ingredients, right? And so this is a general rule of thumb that I like to share with my clients, is that anytime you start to see a laundry list of ingredients of things that you can't even recognize, words that you can't pronounce. Let's say there's like 20 ingredients, there's lots of numbers within that list. It's generally a food that is not going to be good for your body. So we're always looking for ingredients that you recognize. In this case, we're seeing sugar, strawberries. High fructose corn syrup, which I'll talk about in just a moment, is another one of those that we want to avoid, right? Lots of research and science out there that shows it is not good for us. It can cause all kinds of medical issues down the road. But some of these other things, again, are pretty recognizable. So, we want to make sure that we're looking out for, again, things that we recognize that are low in trans fat, low in sugar, but high in fiber, high in protein, words that you can pronounce, like whole grain as an example, and generally have a short list of ingredients. When we are thinking about things that we should avoid, right, those are things that will contain high fructose corn syrup, hydrogenated or partially hydrogenated oil. Again, it's all about the quality, trans fat, artificial color, artificial flavor, if it's a long list of ingredients. And then, of course, we're looking for things like sugar, fructose, sucrose, lactose, MSG, hydrolyzed vegetable protein, et cetera. So there's a long list that I can certainly share with you for support if anybody's interested. But again, that just is kind of a rundown of what to avoid. Okay. All right. So now, and those are just some tips that I had already shared, right? So these are things to look for to the left, right? And things to avoid to the far right. Okay, so now that I've given you, right, a little bit of background, kind of like a, let's say, flash lesson in reading a label, let's take a look at this. Okay, so we probably recognize, right, that tiger that's on the box here, Frosted Flakes, right? So when we look at Frosted Flakes and we look at the ingredients, there's a few ingredients that are highlighted in red that should automatically pop out, right? And we are in our heads thinking like, this is what she just talked about and things that we should avoid, right? So when we think about, again, trying to pick out a healthier cereal, I'll be honest with you, it's a pretty hard thing to do. It takes a lot of time to look at all of the different labels and nutrition facts to try to find something that's high in fiber, high in protein, and low in sugar. So for some of you who, might like the sweetness of the cereal, that is where the natural sugar of the fruit comes in, and why it's so important to kind of balance that out so that you can also feel that sense of satisfaction by getting something that you enjoy the flavor of. Okay, so let's take a look here at this image of white bread. So again, remember what I shared with you from before about trying to select whole grains, right? So in this case, there are 2 ingredients that should really pop out at you that were on our list of things to avoid, right? So you see here the high fructose corn syrup and the sugar. And again, do that grocery test next time you're at the store, and just hold a loaf of white bread and wheat bread, and you can see the difference, right? Okay, here's another family favorite. I know, I'm sorry to break the news. You'll see Cool Whip, right? So Cool Whip is one of those things. Again, we're talking about moderation here, folks, right? So again, these are just things to kind of stay away from or really limit, right, to, let's say, special occasions or every once in a while, because they are all in the red light category that I mentioned. So lots of red here, right? So hydrogenated vegetable oil, high fructose corn syrup. Again, probably not in our better interest, but you can still get, again, if you take time to look at the quality, you can find some really great alternatives that, don't have this long list of things to avoid. Here's another favorite. Right here. Okay, so when we look at Sunny D, right, we've seen lots of commercials for Sunny D, for orange juice, and you see in the ingredient list numbers, yellow number 5, yellow number 6, high fructose corn syrup. Again, when it comes down to it, right, we just have to think about if you can't pronounce it, don't recognize it, see numbers or see the words high fructose corn syrup, right, or trans fat and those sorts of things, we generally want to try and avoid them. Same thing here, right, when we take a look at Easy Mac. So take a look, yellow number 5, artificial flavors, corn syrup solids, calcium phosphate. And then we see that again with Pop-Tarts, right? So sugar, corn syrup, lots of sugar, dextrose, fructose, corn syrup. Again, we're thinking about what we should be feeding our bodies so that we are able to perform better. And so a lot of these foods, unfortunately, when we eat them and overconsume them, they're having a really, let's say, negative effect on those areas of performance, right? So let's say slamming down a few Pop-Tarts right before practice is probably not in your best interest. Or let's say, having a breakfast, that's loaded in sugar isn't going to set you up for a great start to your day, because your blood sugar is just going to crash, let's say, and you have a test that morning at school. So again, it's really important to think about what you're putting in your body, because it absolutely, the science shows, has an impact on how you perform in class and how you perform on the field. Okay, so I'm sure you're thinking that this lady wants to take away all the things that are good for me or that I enjoy and, put me on this boring diet. And that is not true whatsoever. So what I generally say is this, right? It's all about finding the balance and moderation. That is the key to living a healthy lifestyle, right? Not just now as a teenager, but even, right, as you age, right, and get to, let's say the age of 85, because eating is supposed to be pleasurable. We're supposed to enjoy the flavor. We're supposed to feel happy and feel full from the foods that we eat. It's never about deprivation or taking all the things away, that you love. You can have a fast food treat. You can have that ice cream or dessert, right? But it's all about moderation and what you are putting in your body most of the time. Okay, so that's the key here. The key is balance and moderation, and asking yourself, what do I eat most of the time? So think about the green, yellow, and red light food. If you are most of the time eating foods in the red light category, then maybe it is time to reevaluate the things that you're eating and maybe take a look at, let's say, your grades, your performance on the field, and maybe there's a direct connection, ding, 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 right? Or let's say you're somebody who does have somewhat of a balanced diet. You probably feel like you can focus better in class, and you're probably in a better mood, and do pretty well out there, let's say, at practice. So again, what we eat is very much important. So you can go out to the restaurants with your friends or with your family. You can even go to a fast food place, like let's say Chick-fil-A as an example. But you got to focus on the quality of food, right? Rather than those large portions that are filled with junk carbs and unhealthy fats. So how can you, let's say, go to a fast food place and make it work for you, or go to a restaurant and make it work for you? You can think about this. Is there a grilled option? You could ask for fruit as a side, right, instead of the fries. You could go without the bun or just remove half of the bun. You could go bunless and ask for a lettuce wrap instead. You can sometimes, depending on the establishment, sometimes they have sweet potato fries. So opt for the sweet potato fries instead of regular fries, because there's going to be a little bit more nutritional value from those. Ask for a side salad as an example, to add those vegetables to your plate. Now, this is a big one, the sugary beverages. So drinking water instead of soda is always going to be something that is recommended for you at any age, any stage of your life. Water is so, so important. And the more sugary drinks that we consume, and it doesn't necessarily have to just be soda, it could be sports drinks as well. Some of those sports drinks are loaded in sugar, and over time can add lots of, let's say, health issues down the road, right, with all of that sugar consumption. So just pay attention to the label. Remember what I shared with you. Look at the back. Look at where it says sugar. Try to pick something, let's say, that says 0, and start that way, right? So it's baby steps, but water is always going to be the preferred drink of choice. And then sometimes go for the kid-sized portion meals versus the super-sized meals. Take extra snacks with you, right, to supplement that meal if you're going for a smaller size and you have a bigger appetite. School lunches. So how do you, let's say, make healthier choices at school? Going for the salad bar, balancing your plate with protein and vegetables, drinking lots of water, and avoiding the vending machines and concession stands that are filled with junk food, unfortunately. There's a newer trend that's happening within the schools, and I'll talk to you about that in just a little bit, about how that can change. Snacks are also something that's really important, right? Pack your own. Packing, let's say, little Ziploc bags, or getting the pre-portioned bags of nuts, trail mix, fresh fruit, string cheese, yogurt, bringing your own snack, asking mom or dad or your caretaker to, pack a little, let's say, cold bag, right, with a freezer pack in it, and you can keep some things for you after school if you have practice. But again, it all comes back to, thinking about the choices that we make and asking yourself, is my performance in class, is how I perform on the field as an athlete, is that important to me? And if your answer is yes, then you will make these changes, right? And you will start to think about, foods that are good for you. So when we think about our plate, right, and what that could look like, here's a great visual for you, right? So again, about 1/4 of your plate should have that protein. 1/4 would be, let's say, the starchier carb or the whole grain. So those starchier carbs would be things like potatoes, corn on the cob, peas, any sort of winter squash as an example. And then the vegetables that you see there, right, those are our non-starchy vegetables. And there's a long list of those, right? Carrots and lettuce, onion, tomatoes, cucumbers, etc. The list goes on and on. Okay, so how can you make your school a healthier place, right? And so here are just a few examples of how you yourself can share this information with people within your own community. So being more vocal about your school lunch program, paying attention to those menus. If you are looking at those menus and you feel like there's lots of red light foods on that menu, well, talk to your local PTA, talk to the school council, talk to your principal, and see what kind of changes you can make to bring some more green light and yellow light foods, right, to balance those meals out so that again, students can perform better in the classroom and better on the field, right? And of course, you're not going to have a principal that will tell you, no, I don't want you to perform well, right? They want you to, especially when it comes to those test scores, right? So again, we want to make sure that we are feeding our students with the best foods possible, right? And that you all are also being proactive and taking ownership of your own health. Asking booster clubs, right, to provide healthier options at concession stands. A lot of times at concession stands, we have lots of sodas and candy and things that are just loaded in sugar. And so if you are an athlete, let's say, for example, that is about to go on the court and you didn't pack a snack, you're probably going to rush to the concession stand and down, right? Let's say a few candy bars, and you might feel great temporarily, but again, you're going to lose steam, your blood sugar is going to crash, and you won't be able to perform as best as you possibly could have by packing a healthier snack. So again, the idea is simple, guys. You have the power to make changes happen in your own communities and schools. And you essentially, right, are getting to the age where you are making decisions about what you are eating, and should take control of your health so that these healthy habits can not only stay with you now, but even go on as you grow up and to become an adult. Okay, so one of the best gifts that we can share with each other is the gift of health. So take this information, share it with your community, share it with your family members. Go, with mom or dad or your caretaker. Go to the grocery store with them. Help them meal plan. There's lots of things that you can do to, again, have more direct control over your health and the choice of foods that you are putting in your body. And there's lots of research out there too. For those of you that like to, let's say, research and are into the science, it'd be really great to, do a research project, right, on, one of the things that I had mentioned, right, the marketing that happens, to teenagers and to youth when it comes to, foods. You can take a look at the data as far as, what the links are with nutrition and academic performance, with nutrition and performance in sports. There's all kinds of information out there. The question is are we paying attention to it? Okay, so again, thank you so much for having me here today. I truly appreciate each and every one of you. And again, thank you to FEMA Region 6 for allowing me this time to share a little bit of information with you all regarding nutrition and the impact that it can have on our youth. You can follow us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube for some fun recipes and tips and the latest news with what we are up to at the H2 Life NB. And then, of course, you could always send an email at the h2lifenb@gmail.com or check out our website, the h2lifenb.com, to learn more about how you can become healthier and not only live well, but live long. All right, guys, thank you so much. I truly, truly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all today, and take care.